Coming to you live from high atop a national monument looking out over America and the world, it is the Mount Rushmore podcast. I am Jeff, and this is Richard.
Hello.
And this is Michael.
Howdy.
And we're coming back, ain't we, guys? We're back.
It's great to get all that furloughed money, right, rolling right in.
Yeah.
Our paychecks are finally, bank account is right back. We're allowed to open the Mount Rushmore National Monument again,
Yes.
and we're allowed to rank things again.
All things that are themed after state-funded monuments are actual state-funded podcasts, which is what we are.
It was tough to not be paid to rank things.
Yeah.
Ever since we've ever started this podcast.
Never,
It's been
never.
3 years.
Never
It's been tough
received
for that long, too.
income.
As well as the past month, it's been tough for the 35 other months.
Well, it was cool to, in lieu of pay, we just worked and still did this podcast, and we're still working because
At some point, the pay is going to come.
at some point it's going to come in.
We are the heroes. We're the heroes.
We are the heroes, and you know what? We have our own solo path. We walk our own path because we are lone wolf heroes, which is the subject. Oh, do you hear that? All those wolves alone. They're all calling out to each other because they don't want to be alone, or maybe they do. They just want to say hello.
I'm ready to piss on my territory to mark it. That's why I just peed in your.
Oh God, I
your
was
garage.
wondering what the motivation was. Okay, so the category, the subject for this episode's Mount Rushmore is the Mount Rushmore of lone wolves, and I chose it because I am not a lone wolf. I'm somebody who is very socially interdependent on interaction. I'm always going out and trying to ingratiate myself with people and hang out with people and get them to like me in some way. So I kind of respect that lone wolf individual or character or thing in literature or in life or whatever. And so that is the subject of this episode's podcast. And the lonest wolf, eeny, meeny, miny, Richard, is going to start.
All right. So my first choice is Omar Little. Omar's coming.
Oh, wow.
From The Wire.
The Wire, okay.
Incredible character, played by Michael K. Williams. One of the, I think, most enduring characters from the show. Someone who was basically a stick-up man in Baltimore. But his MO is that he would rob drug dealers. Wouldn't rob civilians, as he would call them, but would only rob the bad guys.
Very Robin Hood-ish.
Yeah, it was very
Robin the Hood.
Do you feel like this is a leftover, Michael? This is like a leftover from Robin Hood?
I don't know. I've never seen The Wire. So
Oh,
Okay.
Michael.
I'm the one white 40-year-old male that has never seen The Wire.
But the whole Wire is about this network of cops and
Cops.
drug
It's in
dealers.
Baltimore, and it's basically about sort of how the underworld works and how the drug trade specifically sort of touches every part of life in Baltimore, from politics to the newspaper to the docks to everywhere.
Yeah.
And Omar is
not
basically
the docks.
yeah,
Oh.
even the docks. And Omar he's this guy who has he's kind of does it on his own way, does things his own way. He's got his own moral code that he sticks by. He takes his grandmother to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
But he's not Robin Hood because he's doing this for himself. I mean,
Yeah.
he's doing this to get money, and he's very ruthless at what he does.
Yeah.
He's also very meticulous in planning and the execution of these things. But he's a violent thug. He just happens to be a violent thug who has decided to focus all of his tendencies toward other bad guys.
Okay.
And I just think he's just such a fascinating character. And they sort of showed throughout the course of the series that anytime someone kind of got close to him, they wound up getting hurt because he's just somebody who has a big target on him because all of the drug dealers know, hey, he's a guy who basically just walk up to you and rob from you.
Does he push them away, or does just the association?
Oh, I just mean physically getting hurt. This was not a.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was not a metaphor. I meant like getting killed or getting.
No. I know, but I mean, how can I rephrase that?
In Spanish.
Is ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? SNL Mercado.
Es en el baño.
No, does he welcome people into his life, or are just the people in his life taken from him because of his life?
I think it's more the latter than the former. I mean, he's portrayed as a gay man, which is also, an interesting choice in this kind of very male macho kind of world that he kind of sets him apart from everybody else. And he winds up getting murdered by like a 10-year-old kid.
Oh, spoiler alert!
Spoiler alert,
We're gonna
everybody!
watch.
Spoiler alert!
People haven't had time to see The Wire.
Yeah, but at this point, I think the
Yeah.
statute of limitations has expired.
Do you think he shares
Oh, the
something in
statue
common?
expired.
Oh shit! Who carved that limited statue?
It's made out of butter.
I love the commonalities between these guys, and some lone wolves are like wounded by some previous thing, or they have some kind of backstory. That's the reason that they went out on their own. It seems like every buddy cop film starts off with somebody who's a lone wolf who's kind of forced to partner up with somebody else.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Does he have that in his backstory?
Not so much. I mean, there are times where he partners with people that he kind of has to.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not as prevalent as he's not Dirty Harry. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Cool. Good start, Omar from The Wire. Michael.
My first start is Ted Kaczynski, the
Also,
Unabomber.
Wow.
Oh,
on,
I'm sorry, the Unabomber.
also on my list.
Oh, great.
A historical. Okay.
What I didn't realize was that he wasn't like as of like his being caught in 1996, he had been Unabombing for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Since like 1978.
Oh.
I didn't realize it had gone on for nearly 20 years.
Well, if you would have looked at his LinkedIn, you would have seen his work record.
Went to Harvard and then also Unabombing 78 to
Yeah.
95.
Oh.
But like, I guess that was just my being youthful and only really kind of, he kind of reemerged into the popular zeitgeist after he kind of published they got that like crazy manifesto published. And of course, that was the thing that led to his ultimate capture.
Well, you say it's crazy.
Okay.
You also just heard about the Ramones when their Best Of album came out.
Oh, it's
too.
so good.
Yeah.
The first song, Blitzkrieg.
Barp. Okay,
But no, the point being that he had been a fugitive from the law and the FBI for a long time before he was ultimately caught, and ultimately caught because he had this big thing that he forced to be published. He kind of ransomed kind of America in a way, the national media.
Yeah.
And then, of course, within a year, his brother helped turn him in. And it was like, oh, yeah, this is the guy.
That's all the shit my brother says at Christmas.
But
It's
this
in that manifesto.
That was in his like holiday letter to the family.
I think that's Ted.
Yeah.
But this was a person that had his lone wolfismness was self-imposed. He kind of saw the ills of society. He kind of started to reject, he started to reject society, and for all of its ills. The published manifesto was called "Industrial Society and Its Future," and it was all about kind of the consequences and disasters of mankind. And there's a certain libertarianism that you feel like is all up in that.
Yeah.
That kind of forces a person into this life of being one with wilderness. Last year, we talked about bunkers on one episode. This guy's a total bunker guy.
Yeah.
And these are a self-imposed lone wolfism. It doesn't seem like, maybe it was a personality trait that eventually developed, but this seems like totally brought upon himself.
Do you think he would have been
A guest on the podcast? I don't know. He's still alive, so let's ask him.
phone or Skype in? Well, there's the militia, the people who were trying to get away from the posse comitatus kind of people who are trying to get away from the civilization that we know and then live independently, live off the grid, but also they were living in a community. Or we think of other religious sects and things that live in or remove from those others.
Yeah, cult of lone wolfism.
Do you think he knew that his illegal activity would also be more visible if he was in the mainstream society? Do you think it was probably easier for him to do stuff in a cabin in the woods?
Oh, for sure. I mean, eventually they auctioned off all that stuff, and I guess it's like, I was over the holidays. Emily and I and Felix went to Indiana, And at some point, we were in kind of the middle of Indiana, in like Bloomington, which is like an hour south of Indianapolis, which is, their major metropolis. And we were driving from a friend's house back through some country roads. And I said to her, I was like, oh, you could do some murders out here. And it wasn't like too far off like a road. It just felt very different from growing up in suburbia and growing up in like a major city. So someone that's living out in the middle of, was it Montana? No.
Yeah, Montana.
Montana.
Were you cleaning a pistol at the time or sharpening a machete?
It was one of those hooks, those giant hooks and a chain.
Oh, yeah, like the
Like
wall is covered with them over here.
But like the distance between people and the isolation just in a relatively populated area like that versus when you're just out in the middle of nowhere, you can do whatever you want. And obviously this guy did for nearly 20 years was send bombs through the mail.
Yeah.
Richard, why is he on your...
Kind of the same reasons. I mean, look, he might be crazy, but you got to admire his fortitude. He's stuck with this. A lot of guys would have given up after, 5 years.
Your regular serial killer would have done it for the attention sooner.
Or they would have, a normal person, someone without his, Ted Kaczynski's
intellect. He's a smart. He was a Harvard grad.
Well, he was a Harvard grad, and also just his willingness to persevere would have said after 5 years of these bombs going off and nobody getting the point, I'm done, or I'm going to switch to something else. Maybe instead of bombs, it's going to be
candy.
Yeah, maybe it can be candy grams.
Artisanal soaps.
But he believed in what he was, he believed in his message.
Yeah.
And he believed in the method the message was getting out there.
Yeah.
I wish I could be that focused in my job search, frankly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, seriously, one of the things I did want to point out is that he was involved in this really fucked up experiment in college, where basically someone came in and yelled at him and belittled him for like an hour every week. And then they would replay video of him getting yelled at, and he'd have to sit there and watch it. And this went on for most of his time at Harvard. He was part of this study. And if that doesn't make you think that maybe society and organizations are not exactly the best for you, I don't know what would.
Wow. You sure it wasn't just like a German or Russian class that he took? He thought he was being belittled. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that's a commonality one. Okay, cool. So, what is your second, Michael?
My second, also a guy that lives off the grid, but this is definitely not necessarily self-imposed, but just how he was brought up. Crocodile Mick Dundee.
Oh my God.
Or is it Mick Crocodile Dundee? I don't know. Either
Mac,
way.
I think it's Mac. I think he's actually Scottish.
This is the Paul Hogan character. This is a fictitious character.
A fictitious character.
Because it's not Steve. We're in the Croc Hunter.
That's right.
Okay.
Because he had a family.
Yeah.
And then they went on to pursue doing exactly what Daddy did.
Yeah.
Which seems very interesting and scary to me. But the character of Crocodile Dundee is this kind of famous loner who kind of, quote, goes walkabout and, trundles through the outback of Australia.
Which Paul Hogan knew that he's in some rarefied air here with the Unabomber.
He's ultimately very charming and is a life that has built on living with the Aboriginal people of Australia, along with the other drunks at the local watering hole.
Yeah.
But he seems to be a person that kind of comes in and out of their town and their life. And although a lot of it seems to be as like a tourist trap, he doesn't have a whole lot of experience in society in general, or dealing with a lot of people, or dealing with technology, or dealing with anything.
Shayla's. Not dealing with Shayla's.
So it's ridiculous to have this sort of pick immediately following like a very serious murderer as a guy who just an actor that fake skins
that
alligators.
Did Paul Hogan start that as it was a he was almost like a Weekend Update character on a news. He was a comedic character on a news show or something like that, where it was
You've obviously listened to the Paul Hogan audiobook more than I have.
Well, he was an editor. I think he would give editorials as this Australian construction worker, and he would. It was a bit of satire in that, say, Ricky Bobby, the character from Will Ferrell.
You're saying it was like Aunt Blabby?
Yeah, well, he was like, I don't know, Aunt Blabby.
From, what's his name? Jonathan Winters.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think he was Paul Hogan was actually, I think, a construction worker or something like that, but he was also had a sense of humor and was doing this broad character. And
is Adam Carolla?
You know what he constructed? Crocodiles.
He made crocodiles. But I think that character started as a bit of satire, and he would do guest spots on the news in this character.
Oh, that's interesting.
As this archetypal regional Australian character, and but one who was able to say the things that the truths that people needed to hear, and in this broad character. But yeah, he was an outsider in that some of his opinions were kind of satirical and maybe non-PC for that time. So
I like a character that is outside of society, that comes into it and is just like perplexed by it.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, in Crocodile Dundee 2 is forced to go on the lam again and evade a drug cartel, as we've all done it.
It's a natural flow of life.
Naturally done. Maybe Omar was after him. I don't know.
So maybe actually he created the character for a series of Foster's, or a character very similar for Foster's ads that he was doing in the UK.
Okay.
Where he was this sort of fish out of water in England, this like very Monty Python Bruce kind of character.
Okay.
I never saw Crocodile Dundee Goes to Hollywood, but that's next on my list, I guess, to watch.
I feel like he and the Vern character should have had a versus film or something like that.
Like an Alien versus Predator, except stupid.
That one of the great team-ups of like 1989.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Freddy and Jason anymore. I just
No.
want to see Paul Hogan and Pee Wee Herman. And
Yeah.
Can we get Bobcat Goldthwait and Jim Varney? Yeah.
The ghost of Jim Varney and the cracked shell of Paul Hogan.
Ernest Goes to Australia confronts.
Writes itself, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that brings us to our halftime, and at this point, we have the opportunity to implore you to don't be a lone wolf. Join the masses of people who are running, sprinting to the iTunes, to Stitcher, to iHeartRadio, and listening to past episodes of the Mount Rushmore podcast. They're rating and reviewing. I want to thank a new listener named Cameron Stell, who told me that she listened to some episodes of our podcast recently.
Awesome.
And she said normally she listens to like murder podcasts. So I think we maybe start adding some more murder to this one.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say for a future episode. But yes, at one point this season, one of us will be murdered.
Yes. This.
But which one? That's the question.
Finally, our audience is excited.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So we appreciate Cameron, you coming on board, and if you, Cameron, or any other listener, would download, rate, and review any previous episodes, it would help other potential listeners find our podcast, and I would appreciate that, and so would Richard and Michael. And we'd also appreciate if you support other podcasts, which you probably do because you certainly didn't find ours first. And you could do that.
Can you imagine?
Then they decide, nope, I don't like podcasts.
Well, just like, if you're like, I'm going to give this podcast thing a listen. I've been hearing a lot about it. Let's see. What am I into? Randomly going to select one. And then, oh, no. This is what they've been doing?
Podcasts are the worst. Well, you could maybe support this podcast.
Hi, I'm Jay, and I want to tell you about my new podcast, This Zennial Life. It's a weekly short burst of stories, insights, health and wellness tips, and more from a Zennial who is still a work in progress. Go to thiszenniallife.wordpress.com for details. Listen to This Zennial Life today.
And We are back, but we want to, before we get into our third and fourth choices, invite you to support our social dialogue. On Facebook, we're asking people like yourself what kind of topics you'd love to hear us rate, or rank. Now that we're back off furlough, you could also, we're getting back onto the Instagram, back on Twitter. So if you want to join us and get in the dialogue in those social platforms, that would be cool too. Lone wolves, the third category, the third choice. It's a lone cat. Oh, kitty.
Cute.
Richard,
and now it just got eaten by the lone wolf.
the lone wolf chewed on his prey. What he's a lone wolf. He can't just go to Ralph's and buy like some wolf food.
Yeah, exactly. What do wolves eat at the store? They probably would eat.
I'm gonna go to the deli section first, get some fried chicken. What would you? They're probably not.
If I was a wolf, oh yeah, fried chicken would be pretty good. And you got bones, so you get a lot of good marrow.
Go to the frozen food, get a 25-pound butterball, and think when this thaws out, this is gonna be a great meal.
I am so set.
What's your third, Richard?
My third is The Man with No Name from the Dollars trilogy, as played by Clint Eastwood.
Oh shoot! Okay.
Are you thinking of a different Man with No Name from the Dollars trilogy?
There is another Clint Eastwood character named Harry Callahan, who was chosen by one of our listeners, and that listener was Evan Block. Evan Block submitted a Rushmore of lone wolves, and Evan Block chose a dirty.
Evan Block is a should be on the Rushmore of lone wolves.
That would have been a stellar pick by any of us.
But in the fourth place category,
you go, Evan.
Yeah, he's in 4 movies. But The Man with No Name is in how many films?
3. It's a trilogy. So it's a fistful of dollars for a few dollars more than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah. And, the iconic...
What was that guy's name again?
Exactly. An iconic Western character. Perhaps the most iconic of any major, post-John Wayne character. And someone who, throughout the course of the movies, actually talks less and less. That was something that Eastwood sort of pitched to Sergio Leone, just like, I shouldn't be talking as much. I should be talking as little as possible to keep this kind of mystery of who he is out there.
That's just a movie star move. I want to get more money, but I want to have less lines, and I'm going to do less.
Yeah.
He does all of his acting by squints.
Yeah, well, the first one where he read the Jabberwocky poem, that was like such a long scene.
It was a weird shootout. Yeah. It was a weird shootout. And actually, in each movie, they mention his name at some point. But he has a different name in each one. So it sort of becomes like this sort of nobody knows his real name sort of vibe.
Lazy screenwriting.
That is lazy.
Just fill it in. What's his name? Dirk Blankford.
Gern Blanston?
Yeah, but it's
this is
but it was all like Giuseppe and all this stuff like that.
This is before movies had like the continuity people that ran around just wrote things down like, oh no, it was the gun was in his left hand, the whip was in his right. It was just like, what was the main character's name?
I don't know.
Todd
Flankels.
Yeah.
Dean.
Was it Trevor?
Yeah. Trevor Fringenberg.
I don't know. Okay, so what made you pick this? Obviously Westerns are known for these individualist characters.
So I was actually thinking about Westerns in general when I made this pick.
Okay.
Because to your point, I think Westerns are sort of emblematic of the lone wolf character. The guy who rides into the town with the sagebrush rattling behind him and kind of their job is there to clean up the town and then move on somewhere else.
Yeah, often it's an occupational hazard when you shoot people for a living.
Right.
You end up by yourself at the end.
Yeah.
Do you think Eastwood was just kind of looking for a job, or do you think he was interested in carrying on in this tradition kind of established by Hawks and Ford and Wayne and all the Gary Cooper? I always wonder how much he was steeped in Western lore or even samurai lore or all those things.
Oh, sure, because he's based off of a Kurosawa character.
Yeah.
So
he's like Mifune, essentially.
Basically, but like the Western version, Western by way of Rome.
Yeah, and Kurosawa was analyzing the Howard Hawks, John Ford Westerns.
Right, so it's sort of a meta. It's very meta that it's sort of a take on a take.
Yeah. Do you think Eastwood essentially, because Evan Block, a listener of the podcast and a gentleman who suggested a Mount Rushmore, which I'll read, he suggested Harry Callahan, which is a guy who says pretty little himself. Usually if he's saying something...
Wait, there's a pattern here.
Yeah. If he's saying something, he's about to shoot you.
Right.
So do you think that is something that... essentially Eastwood is kind of playing the same guy with a different suit on?
Yeah, he is basically. It's different, just a slightly different era, and like you said,
yeah,
trading a poncho for a 70s sport blazer.
Yeah,
basically.
I don't remember the films. Does he have flings? Does he have women who come through his life like Bond and they die after the first reel?
I'd have to think about it.
Because sometimes those guys...
He's got Eli Wallach. Does that count?
Does that count as a love interest? Cool. Okay, cool choice. Cool choice, Michael.
I've got another tough guy.
Is it me?
It's not you.
Oh, okay.
You're the toughest guy.
That's true.
John Rambo.
John Rambo. Awesome choice.
From the Rambo movie. Now it's entering, as of coming up this year, its 5th entry is coming out.
They're making another one?
They're making
No.
Rambo Last Blood. Because, of course, you start with First Blood. You got to eventually get First Blood Part 2.
Yeah.
First Blood Part 3, Secret of the Ooze.
Right.
First Blood Part 4, Rambo Goes Hawaiian, and then, Rambo Last Blood.
Does he mentor the offspring of somebody he shot in the first film in this one?
I don't know, but I think that there is a very interesting thing that happened with the first movie, and it kind of went off the rails with Rambo 2 and 3. In the first one, they were really kind of analyzing the POW, the Vietnam War soldier that came back and felt abandoned.
Yeah.
That was this person that was kind of traveling from town to town. He went to go visit a friend and discovered that he was dead, died of Agent Orange poisoning.
Yeah.
And was kind of moving through Washington State and came across a small town, and the sheriff there started hassling him and yada, 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 big guns, explosions, machine guns, things blow up. And eventually he's like, the end of the movie is really sad. He's driven to tears being like, look at all the things that the American soldiers have done and you treat us like shit.
Yeah.
And gets arrested. Mm-hmm. The second movie starts with him being under arrest or for a few years being in prison, being let out to go be sent on like a solo mission.
Yeah.
And yada, 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 things blow up, blah, 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 blah. But even in the second one, he goes off and it's kind of like this weird setup mission where like this politician kind of is like, we'll send him to rescue these POWs, but we're kind of just doing this to save face. We don't we think he's going to die. We don't really want to spend the money to do it. And then he comes back and is another heartfelt, you don't give a shit about us sort of thing. And I think
and then the senator pulls out like a submachine gun and starts firing more explosions, etc.
Yeah. The third one, a little bit the same. He again retreats away from like modern life. He retreats to like Thailand and becomes like a guy that fights people.
Yeah.
And then of course the US military comes knocking again. Knock, knock, knock. Hey, we need your help to do some shit. Can you help us out? And I'm interested in that trope of this person that keeps getting called back to duty. Yeah. Even though all they want to do is be away from everyone. They've served and they're done with it, but then something keeps calling them back.
Like Cher. I feel like
Rambo is a lot like Cher.
Skin level is about skin quality is about the same.
But I don't know. There's the kind of society has pushed him away, or militarized society has pushed him away, but then militarized society keeps pulling him back, and I think that's pretty interesting. And I don't know a lot of veterans. I don't know a lot of people that have served in the military. Quite frankly, where we kind of exist in this weird middle generation that didn't really have a war to fight in. Yeah. Like by the time the first Desert Storm started, I was in junior high. I would have not been dodging the draft. Wait a second, Jeff. But no, it's interesting to think of like by the time that the Iraq War started, I was kind of in my 20s, but out of college, and like I wasn't really into that wasn't my thing. That wasn't like a headspace for me. But I think that a lot of us are kind of in this. We weren't old enough for the Vietnam War. We weren't really young enough to be in Afghanistan in the second Iraq War. It's just like, it's strange to think if there are people that's what culture has bred from, the First World War to the Korean War to Vietnam. There was a war every 10 years. And so there are generations of people that like you are forgotten, or especially Vietnam. That's a weird one. Cause like, World War II is the great noble war that you fought in. And then Vietnam is like, that's you guys.
That's kind of a whole subgenre, I think, of, in a way, the Mifune character, a warrior without a war, or a warrior who's
no longer needed.
And so he is like a boxer, like Tyson outside the ring. Where is his violence? Where is his skill for dealing out death? Where is that to be employed? And exactly what you're talking about. I had no understanding of Stallone's actually depth of analysis for that character until I read an interview in the Interview magazine where he talked about the how non-vets were treated and the profile that it created for these individuals who came home to a world that did not value them and did not salute, appreciate their efforts and the psychological toll that death in Vietnam took on them. So yeah, that's a cool profile. So that is a neat idea, like the warrior, because think of like the man with no name. He wasn't necessarily in fighting a war or anything like that, but he's somebody who was like Omar Little, trying to find his way in life on the fringes.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. What do you got, Richard?
All right. So my last choice is Steve Williams, otherwise known to wrestling fans by his alter ego, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh wow.
Stone Cold, when he first came to then WWF, I guess, back in the 90s, what was it, 97, something like that. We'll correct some wrestling nerd.
Some wrestling nerd will be like, oh, actually, it was 1995, and he was wrestling a few years before that.
Whenever it was the
exactly
mid-90s.
Like every wrestling
They
fan.
they sound like Janice from the Dr. Tongue Teeth. Like, well,
I told her I wouldn't pose nude, even if it was artistic. No, he originally was given this. His nickname was the Ringmaster.
Oh,
which is about as lame of a
Did he have a
nickname as
toilet
you
brush?
could possibly get. Well, with the shaved head, they thought he was Mr. Clean for a while, and no, that's before he had the shaved head. And so they decided to give him try to change his character and who he was. So they gave him a list of names that was inspired by this hitman, Richard Kaczynski, who was this really infamous like mob hitman. They did a movie with Michael Shannon about him a few years ago. He was like basically had this
Iceman.
Yeah, the Iceman, exactly, where he had this very normal kind of home life. They had convinced his wife he'd work this 9-to-5 job, and in actuality, he was this like just, straight up contract killer. He murdered hundreds of people. So they gave him a list of names inspired by him, including Otto von Ruthless, Ice Dagger,
Ooh, okay.
Fang McFrost, and Chili McFreeze.
These sound like Rankin and Bass holiday special.
Yes.
I have seen Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
With Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he says all of these things in one sentence.
Chili McFreeze.
I'm going to go to Dairy Queen and get a Chili McFreeze. So he decided to come up with his own name, and how he got it was...
This is such a stupid story, but
you know the story, right?
I enjoy it.
Yeah,
it's
basically
silly.
His wife had made him tea, and he was dithering around somewhere, and his wife called him and said, "You better come in here and get your tea. It's going to turn stone cold."
Wow.
Boom. That's where he got the idea for the name.
Could have been Rosemary Mint. It could have been Sleepy Time. Steve Sleepy Time Austin.
Listen, Darjeeling. That'd be funny. Oh, wow. So he got that. I heard Billy Ray Cyrus said something like that's how he got achy breaky heart or something like.
Oh, really?
I forget what somebody started quoting the lyrics to him. Something.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
No, so that's how he got the name, and the persona kind of came from this like what would the persona be of this like psychopathic hitman type character, basically, who wound up turning into the greatest anti-hero of wrestling history.
Yeah.
And you're always anti-Vince McMahon or something like that.
Yeah, that was the sort of the feud that launched him from being popular to arguably being more popular than Hulk Hogan was in his prime.
Oh, okay.
Was this sort of anti-authority, anti-Vince McMahon, who had just been kind of outed as the head of the owner of WWF at the time. And basically the whole thing worked because he was this anti-establishment loner whose whole persona was rebelling against his boss. And wouldn't you like to do that to your boss?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't you like to hit your boss in the head with a steel chair? Mm-hmm. And that was basically...
We're trying to get you to say this on the podcast.
Yes.
Jeff Hopkins, would you like to hit your boss on the head?
My boss doesn't listen to this podcast, but I wouldn't want to.
We almost got him in the trap.
Damn it.
We almost got him
On tape.
He's a trained performer, so he probably would take a hit pretty good. So, yeah, do a roll. Okay. Yeah, so that's a great character. I love that. It's funny. There's something very Letterman-esque about that because Letterman positioned himself as this underdog against the network that he was on at any given
or
time.
GE or whoever happened to own NBC at the time. And I think with Stone Cold Steve Austin, in terms of being a lone wolf, he wasn't someone who had constant tag team partners or people that he, you think of that wrestling in that era, you had like D-Generation X or the NWO or these like kind of cliques and groups of the Four Horsemen.
He was always a reluctant tag team partner. You never knew if at any point in the match he didn't really get along with anybody. So there's possible and most probable that at some point he would also drop a Stone Cold Stunner on, let's say, Mankind.
Right.
That he happened to have been teamed up with that particular week, and then everyone cheers for that because,
that's what Stone Cold does.
That's what he does.
It's like getting excited for a toddler throwing a fit and you think it's very cute. Oh, look, that's so cute.
Yeah.
It's not cute when you're in Bed Bath & Beyond and you're dragging him through the store today. Not that happened today, but that is exactly what happened today.
Did you try hitting your son with a Stone Cold Stunner?
I did not. He just kept wanting to see Cars and Trains. Cars and Trains. And we're at Bed Bath & Beyond. We've got pots and pans.
Yeah.
And it was just like Cars and Trains. And it was just like, smell this candle. Doesn't it smell like waffles?
Look, choo-choo goes the candle.
So, unlike... wasn't The Rock kind of like the people's champion?
He was, quote-unquote, the people's champ, but...
He was interesting because he was...
an egotistical dick, was basically, even when he was a good guy.
Yeah.
That was kind of his character.
His character was that I'm just better than you, and I wear, like, awful clothing.
I wear a lot of silk floral print shirts with, like, one button too far down.
Okay.
Yeah, what a strange character to be... quote over.
I think he wore a lot of bowling type shirts too.
Eventually, though, I bumped the microphone. Eventually, you have to, if you are in league with Vince McMahon and the authority and whoever, the easiest way to turn face to become a good guy is, kick them in the face, kick them in the balls, and then you're just like, we like you now.
Oh, okay.
All of a sudden, it's just like, or if you're aligned with them and then they screw you over for something bigger and better, that's very easy to just be like, oh yes, they can do that to anybody, even if they're aligned. Yeah.
What's your last one, Michael?
Listen, guys, I want to end this on a high note. I didn't know I was going to be last, but I'm happy that I'm last. A children's book by Bill Peet called Kermit the Hermit. This is a book that came out in 1965. If you don't know Bill Peet as an artist, you might know him as a
moss creator,
an animation marveloso. He did a whole bunch of Disney animation in the 60s, from Sword in the Stone to I think he was heavily involved in the Jungle Book. He did a lot of animation. I don't know if he was an animator directly or an animation director, but eventually he kind of broke from Disney and wrote a number of children's books from the kind of mid 60s into the 80s or 90s. And one of my favorites, and one of the things that I immediately thought of, was a book called Kermit the Hermit, which was about a hermit crab who is a bit of a loner, who is a person, a crab in the Monterey Bay who just collects things, just takes things that he finds on the bottom of the ocean and stashes them in his little hermit hole like little treasures and whatever. Just mean, just, just a person that pulls back from society.
Yeah.
And he eventually gets to a point where he's kind of saved by this little boy, like a dog's chasing him or something. And the little boy saves him. And he realizes that there's something more in this world than just holding on to all these little treasures himself. And he ends up helping the boy out. Blah, blah, blah.
That's
blah, blah.
adorable.
But I like the idea of the lone wolf being saved by something. By the lone wolf understanding that he's not alone, that there is something bigger than him in society. And so many of these cases that we've talked about, whether it's Ted Kaczynski, who literally murdered people, who went on to decry society in general, to Rambo, who was someone who was who was himself rejected by society and people of his like, to Crocodile, Dundee, whatever. But Kermit the Hermit was just a delightful story about finding out that there's like a bigger world than your personal world.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Well, cool choices. I want to thank you guys for giving such thoughtful, well-pointed choices. I want to thank Evan Block, podcast listener, for giving us his choices. And they were Frank in Thief, the James Caan performance of a Michael Mann film from 1981. And he's a safecracker who does a job for the mob, who they have other plans for him. Snake Plissken, another 1981
Oh, that's
film.
a good one.
Yeah,
that was on my research tab.
It?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I love that these guys are kind of these reluctant. These guys get pulled into one last job, or it's they do it or they go to jail, or they do it or they know they're going to get killed.
Actually, he actually had Jack Burton on there. I take that back.
Oh, you did? Okay.
But it's pretty much the same character.
Big Trouble character.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had initially written down every Nicolas Cage role, I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So I didn't use any of them because I was like, I don't know if this is actually.
That's funny. And usually in the trailer he says, "If we're doing this, we're doing it my way." And he is alone. Yeah, totally. Max Rockatansky from the Mad Max series, which is funny because when you said, I think in Beyond Thunderdome, when he enters the Thunderdome to compete, the MC in this cabaret-esque type of environment doesn't know who this last-minute entry is and says he's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy, he's the man with no name, which harkens back to
the man with
Eastwood.
no name.
Yeah. Evan's fourth choice was Dirty Harry. The Harry Callahan character, a.k.a. Dirty Harry, and Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, Sudden Impact, and the Deadpool. So that was cool.
That's a better list than either of ours, Michael.
Well, they're cinematic. You guys picked real people and literary
cartoon
people.
hermit
crabs. Okay, so let's see what that gets us. So in this new era of scoring, often point values are attached to choices based on their order, but then it gets kind of weird when somebody's one is also somebody else's two or whatever. But let's go with, I want to go with the Unabomber. That's Michael's one, so that'll be Richard's one. Mm-hmm. And since it was such a good conversation came out of it, let's go with, that's your, let's see, the two would be then.
Just say it and I'll figure it out.
Okay, cool. I like the man with no name and what we talked about with that one.
That's 3 points for Richard.
3 points for Richard. I thought it was really compelling to reveal that Stallone has a lot of real life people that he bases his characters on. So Rocky Balboa was based on
Jerry Quarry.
Yeah. So a real guy. So I like that pick of
3
John
points
Rambo.
There.
And let's go Stone Cold.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this has been, it's been great to be back getting a paycheck for doing what we love.
That's right. 15 whole cents.
15 whole cents. State podcast employees, South Dakota State Podcasters Association. This has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. As always, next week on the Mount Rushmore podcast, we are going to be doing the Mount Rushmore of live albums. So I hope you'll tune in to that.
And we'll be doing it live.
Totally live.
And then recording overdubs and
some echo sweetening, going in, taking out the lead singer's voice, putting in something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's completely live.
Yeah, totally. So join us for that. I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.